When we are first introduced to England, he appears fancy and elegant, although he also seems to have a very brash side, arguing with France and giving an arrogant persona. That seems to be his personality for the rest of the series. You see, a character's first introduction gives the fans insight on what to expect, unless it is done to subvert people's expectations. In the other video, I've talked about how his history greatly shaped his flaws, and this history shaped his relationships with the characters. Since Hetalia has great focus on this aspect, this video will try to dissect that and the story that comes with it. I find his relationship with Veneciano ironic. From the dynamic of a captive and captor to slowly becoming equals. The most major interactions of the characters included that scene from the Industrial Revolution, in which we see England, a former world power, wanting to learn from Italy in the subject of arts. This tells us a lot about them. England, a fool, trapped to his past, paralleling someone in love with the arts in their own messy, childish way. After the not-so-effective teaching, we see England would much rather have someone disciplined, but that does not completely downgrade the relationship. The newest interactions of the two shows them as equals, with England sharing his thoughts with Italy, and this time Italy giving him advice that he could truly benefit from. Italy with good food and a great reputation to most, compared to this dim light called England. So, some people would say that England's most fluffy relationship is with Japan, and I understand why people would believe that. The Industrial Revolution showed how much respect has for Japan, and I think there's a big reason for this. Japan is what England wants to see in himself. He's kind and polite, a person who excelled in the arts while keeping their humility, and a well-liked man whose cuisine reflected his personality. But what does this necessarily come to? Through these characters, we can conclude something about England. He knows he isn't as amazing as before, and even if he won't admit it, he wants a good relationship with people. When talking with Italy, he comes to a conclusion that good cuisine equals a good bond between people, since sharing food and tradition can in fact do so. That would be a major point of the video moving forward. Through this chapter, it is clear that his brothers don't have the best relationship with him. They all have something against him one way or another, and it's kind of interesting to see how it unfolds. Scotland wants to be seen better than him, even denying a somewhat good relationship with England just to be in the EU. And other issues are revealed as we try and relate England's past with them. Their shared history with magic is what really bonds them together. Wales has commented about how England used to be so excited to see magic, but as the years progressed, England's love for it may have weakened in Wales' eyes. We could also take into consideration that these magical events may have happened during the Anglo-Saxon times, which was before the time of the English Empire. It could be that this could have caused a gap in the relationship. England having to cater to his colonies, and as time passed by, his innocence turned rusty. But we have yet to know about the English brothers' history in Hetalia, but we could quite deduce that England may have isolated himself from them. In the present, England is the one to represent the United Kingdom, and some things happen from there. We see that North Ireland may be the brother that interacts with England the least, although he's very sly if he does so. I could safely compare him to France in terms of snarky remarks. Wales seems to understand England the most, his own words, which is quite ironic because he acts the youngest while England's the older brother. Wales has childish innocence, and England's very aware of the harshness in this world. We also see that countries still enjoy power, but definitely not as adamant as before. For them, the power that they hold is basically bragging rights about descendants. I digress. At this point, we get to see one of the most important interactions in the series. We get to see more of Germany relaxing, and his relationship with England definitely needs more moments. The most remarkable scene, however, is the fact that England, for once in his life, managed to bake a non-burnt scone. I have several questions about this. Could this be England's carefree state that allowed him to accomplish this? Or how he felt dominant since Germany decided to visit him, and to what England still sees as Germany still valuing him as a trading partner even after he left? That could obviously refer to Brexit, which makes the timeline quite confusing, although I'll explain that later. Scotland then decides to barge in. There's a lot of burnt scones around him, so we could see that he wants to compete with England, I guess. To join the EU, whether it be for pride or grudge. This is the point where we see that bad cooking is hereditary. I've theorized that the character's story and personality could play a big part in cuisine, and to a greater extent, tradition. Another note. I'm talking about the characters and not the country. If there's something that isn't shown yet, then I try to reference it of real-life events. Since England isn't gloomy, his cooking drastically improves. Though this is only temporary, so I'd say it's because there's unwanted tension between him and a lot of characters. Card battles are also an interesting concept. Are they making their people suffer because things like Scottish Summer is an attack that happens to the character, and maybe also to the people? So if so, then that's kinda mean. Then, as I said, England interacts with Italy. A contrast between the two is shown through cuisine and personality. What I feel England is saying is that this is a truth to keep in mind, but it doesn't change everything. If someone could explain that in a much more precise detail, then that would be great. Benelux shares their food to improve their bond. And it is rather poetic considering how dull the English brothers' table is. Siblings filled with love and passion, contrasting them. But this bugs an unrelated question. How come the food of Italy and Romano appear to be excellent when they don't really have the best relationship with brothers? This is a moment that I find confusing, but food existed way before Hetalia. It's not like you could just change years of history for the sake of a metaphor. But it could be used to a person's advantage. The dull food could reflect the state of a character. Characters like Romano could have a good cuisine which reflects the colorful life he has with his brother, and if this was the case, we could ship and play with this concept, since Hetalia isn't clear with everything. Enter Brexit. Brexit is already something that has been referenced in the manga, but this is where it's the main focus. It's definitely very interesting. Franz has conflicting feelings about his love and hate, but England just wants sleep. Not really, but you know. A major step in England's character is that despite arguing with Franz, he's less violent. He doesn't want to be stepped on, but unlike Franz, he makes an effort to remain his cool. I think it's because Germany and the others are in front of him, and he values reputation over anything, which makes sense. Then he lashes out, saying that he doesn't want his house divided. If we stay and just analyze them as characters, this could mean he values them as brothers because that's their status, and erasing it would complicate many things. England's life becomes very messy. They can't trade within the EU, and it looks like a checkmate until England brings the fact that he could also trade with the rest of the world, bringing the Philippines to the stage as they do their victory dab. As I said in the title of the video, England's arc is going full circle. But in what way? In the last moments we see the character, for now, he is shown to get along with the Philippines, a quiet contrast with how he seemed to not get along with most of them, but now his relationships have greatly improved. And a major example is with America, the boy who wanted freedom, someone who he knew would surpass him, someone who made him see his kingdom differently, showing that they, despite having shortcomings, still see each other as friends. He's still the same man in the beginning, yet we see that he wants to improve. And as the manga continues, his growth as a person may be more evident. Arthur Kirkland is a man who, despite having shortcomings, maybe one day would be able to create delicious scones, but only time would truly tell.